In the swirling sands of the Arabian desert, where the heat shimmers like liquid glass and ancient dunes hold secrets older than memory itself, there exists a realm invisible to human eyes. Within this unseen world dwell beings of extraordinary power, creatures forged not from clay like humanity, but from the very essence of smokeless fire. These are the Jinn, entities that have captivated human imagination for millennia. Their stories woven through the fabric of Middle Eastern culture like golden threads through a midnight tapestry. Picture standing in the vast emptiness of the desert at twilight, that liminal moment when day surrenders to night. The air itself seems alive with possibility, charged with an energy that raises the hairs on your neck. In that space between light and darkness, the Jinn move freely, their presence felt rather than seen, their influence touching the mortal world in ways both subtle and profound. These are not the comical, wish-granting genies of modern cinema, but complex beings possessing free will, immense power, and natures as varied as humanity itself. The Jinn occupy a unique position in supernatural lore. Unlike angels, who serve divine will without question, and unlike demons, who exist purely to corrupt and destroy, the Jinn stand somewhere in between. They can be righteous or wicked, helpful or harmful, noble or base. This moral ambiguity makes them endlessly fascinating. For in the Jinn, we see reflected our own capacity for both good and evil, our own struggles with choice and consequence. From the pre-Islamic traditions of ancient Arabia to the sacred texts of Islam, from medieval manuscripts to contemporary fiction, the Jinn have maintained their grip on human consciousness. They appear in the most famous collection of Middle Eastern tales ever compiled. They figure prominently in religious scripture, and they continue to inspire fear and fascination across multiple continents. Understanding the Jinn means understanding a worldview where the supernatural and natural realms intertwine, where invisible forces shape visible outcomes, and where humanity shares creation with beings of fire who walk unseen among us. Long before the Prophet Muhammad received his revelations, the peoples of Arabia held beliefs about spirits that inhabited the wilderness. In the harsh environment of the desert, where survival demanded constant vigilance and where the landscape itself could kill the unwary, it seemed natural that unseen forces might dwell in the desolate places. The pre-Islamic Arabs spoke of beings that haunted ruins, lurked in dark valleys, and whispered from the winds that swept across endless sands. These ancient Jinn were intimately connected to the natural world. They were thought to reside in specific locations, particular trees, certain wells, isolated caves, deep in mountain ranges. Poets claimed that their verses came not from their own minds, but from Jinn who inspired them, breathing creativity into mortal consciousness. Soothsayers consulted these spirits to divine the future, believing the Jinn possessed knowledge hidden from human understanding. Travelers made offerings at lonely. The very word Jinn comes from the Arabic root meaning to hide or to conceal, perfectly capturing their essential nature. These beings exist in a parallel dimension, a realm called Al-Ghaib, the unseen. They perceive our world clearly, observing human actions, hearing human words, sometimes even influencing human thoughts. But we cannot perceive them in return, not unless they choose to reveal themselves by taking physical form. According to Islamic tradition, which built upon and transformed these older beliefs, the Jinn were created by Allah before humanity came into existence. While humans were fashioned from clay, from the earth itself, the Jinn were born from smokeless fire, from pure flame that burns without smoke. This elemental origin grants them properties fundamentally different from ours. Where we are bound by physical limitations, constrained by gravity and matter. The Jinn possess freedom of movement we can barely imagine. They can traverse vast distances in mere moments. They can penetrate barriers that would stop any mortal creature. They can assume forms as varied as their purposes. The Quran describes their creation with poetic precision, noting that they came from a fire of scorching wind, a flame so intense and pure that it left no ash, no residue, nothing but energy made manifest. This origin in fire explains much about their nature. Fire transforms, fire destroys, fire illuminates, fire warms or burns depending on how it touches you. So too with the Jinn, whose interactions with humanity can enlighten or devastate, protect or harm, depending on the nature of the individual spirit and the circumstances of the encounter. Yet, for all their power, the Jinn share with humanity one crucial characteristic that sets both species apart from angels. They possess free will. They can choose their path, determine their allegiances, decide whether to follow divine guidance or pursue their own desires. This freedom to choose means that Jinn societies mirror human societies in surprising ways. They have families, communities, hierarchies. They marry, have children, form friendships, and enmities. Some Jinn are pious believers who worship Allah and follow His commandments. Others rebel against divine order, becoming forces of chaos and corruption. Still others exist in the gray spaces between, neither wholly good nor entirely evil, pursuing their own interests in a morally ambiguous world. This complexity distinguishes Jinn mythology from simpler supernatural systems. These are not one-dimensional monsters or mindless spirits. They are beings with agency, personality, motivation. Some traditions speak of entire Jinn civilizations existing parallel to our own, with their own cities and kingdoms, their own cultures and customs, their own histories stretching back to the dawn of creation. In some accounts, the Jinn even ruled Earth before humanity appeared, though their reign ended in violence and corruption, necessitating divine intervention. Not all Jinn are created equal. Over centuries of tradition, Islamic scholars and storytellers identified numerous distinct types, each with characteristic powers, temperaments, and typical behaviors. Understanding these classifications helps us grasp the full scope of Jinn mythology and the different roles these beings play in supernatural lore. The Marid stand at the pinnacle of Jinn power. These are the most formidable of all fire spirits, beings of immense strength and profound magical ability. The name itself derives from the Arabic word for giant, and Marid Jinn live up to that designation. Descriptions paint them as enormous entities, their true forms dwarfing any human. In traditional accounts, Marid were originally associated with water, particularly the sea, which seems paradoxical for beings made of fire until you consider that only the most powerful Jinn could master their antithetical element. The Marid appear most frequently in stories about wish-granting. Those famous tales where humans somehow gain control over these mighty spirits and compel them to perform seemingly impossible feats. But these stories contain a crucial warning embedded in their narratives. Marid are not willing servants. They are proud, arrogant beings who deeply resent being bound to mortal masters. When forced to grant wishes, they often do so in ways that technically fulfill the request while causing maximum harm to the wisher. They search for loopholes, twist meanings, turn blessings into curses through malicious interpretation. Only the cleverest humans can outwit a Marid and emerge from the encounter unscathed. The Ifrit represent raw, destructive power made manifest. These are warrior Jinn, fierce and violent, creatures of pure flame who dwell in the deepest deserts or the hearts of volcanoes. Unlike the Marid, who possess cunning alongside their strength, Ifrit are more straightforward in their malevolence. They exist to cause destruction, to spread chaos, to punish those who offend them or merely cross their paths at inopportune moments. Islamic tradition tells of one Ifrit who approached King Solomon with an offer to transport the throne of the Queen of Sheba across vast distances in the blink of an eye. The Ifrit's power was undeniable, but Solomon refused his service, recognizing that relying on such beings meant opening oneself to corruption. This tale illustrates the danger Ifrit represent. They are powerful enough to accomplish extraordinary things, but their very nature makes them unreliable at best and actively harmful at worst. Ifrit often appear as enormous winged beings wreathed in fire, their eyes burning like coals, their presence announced by sudden heat and the smell of sulfur. They are said to live in underground societies, structured along ancient tribal lines, maintaining their own codes of honor and revenge. Some traditions claim Ifrit can marry humans, though such unions inevitably end in tragedy, for the two species are simply too different to coexist peacefully. The Ghoul occupy the darkest corners of Jinn mythology. These are the shapeshifters who haunt graveyards and desolate ruins, the corpse eaters who prey upon travelers foolish enough to venture into lonely places after dark. The very word has entered numerous languages as a synonym for a flesh-eating monster, and with good reason. Ghoul are among the most consistently malevolent of all Jinn types. In their natural state, Ghoul appear as hideously deformed creatures, but they possess the power to assume more pleasing forms, particularly that of beautiful women. Traditional tales speak of male Ghoul who disguise themselves as fellow travelers, gaining the trust of their victims before revealing their true nature and devouring them. Female Ghoul, called Ghula, are even more dangerous, for they can maintain their disguise long enough to marry unsuspecting men, only revealing their monstrous nature after the wedding, when it becomes too late to escape. Yet even among Ghoul, exceptions exist. Some stories tell of humans who manage to establish a bond with these creatures, sometimes through trickery, sometimes through demonstrating uncommon courage. In a few rare tales, a Ghoul might even protect a human who showed them kindness or respect, though such accounts remain uncommon and should not encourage anyone to seek out these dangerous beings. The Jinn represent a somewhat gentler face of Jinn kind, though gentle is perhaps too strong a word for any being made of fire. These are the nomadic Jinn, the wanderers of the desert who take the form of whirlwinds or white camels. Jinn were among the first Jinn encountered by humans in ancient times, and unlike many of their kin, they tend toward neutrality or even benevolence in their dealings with mortals. Jinn possess the power to reveal or conceal desert oases, making them valuable allies for travelers or deadly enemies for those who earn their displeasure. They are said to be enemies of the Ghoul, which alone would make them sympathetic in human eyes. Throughout history, Jinn have allegedly intervened in human conflicts, choosing to aid armies they deemed righteous, while hindering those they judged unworthy. Some scholars attribute various pivotal moments in Islamic history to Jinn intervention, suggesting that the unseen world has shaped visible events more than most realize. The Shaitan deserves special attention, for they embody pure spiritual corruption. While the term can apply broadly to any evil Jinn, it most commonly refers to those spirits who actively work to lead humans astray, who whisper temptations and plant doubts in human hearts. The Shaitan are masters of psychological warfare, subtle in their approach, patient in their corruption. They do not appear with dramatic displays of power, but work through seemingly innocent thoughts, gradually eroding faith and morality through constant, quiet influence. Iblis holds the position of chief among all Shaitan, the original rebel whose pride led to his downfall and eternal enmity toward humanity. According to Islamic tradition, when Allah created Adam and commanded all beings to bow before this new creation, Iblis refused. "I am made of fire," he declared, "while he is made of clay. I am superior and will not prostrate myself before an inferior being." For this disobedience, this monumental pride, Iblis was cast out and cursed, transformed from a jinn into something darker, becoming the Islamic equivalent of Satan. But Iblis requested and received one concession. He asked Allah for time, for the opportunity to prove that humanity was unworthy of the honor shown them. Allah granted this request, and Iblis vowed to spend eternity leading humans astray, demonstrating through their corruption that they deserved no special status. This cosmic conflict between Iblis and humanity forms a central narrative in Islamic theology, explaining the origin of evil and the constant spiritual warfare that defines mortal existence. The Silat represent perhaps the most dangerous jinn of all, not through raw power, but through sheer cunning. These are the master shapeshifters, the jinn whose ability to mimic human form surpasses that of any other type. Where other jinn might assume crude approximations of human appearance, Silat create perfect illusions, becoming irresistibly attractive versions of the opposite sex, luring victims through seduction rather than force. Silat are considered the most intelligent of all jinn, using their formidable intellect to manipulate situations to their advantage. They plan meticulously, thinking several steps ahead, ensuring that their victims walk willingly into traps that appear as opportunities. Many traditions describe Silat with vampiric characteristics, suggesting they drain not just physical life, but spiritual energy, leaving their victims depleted in body and soul. Almost invariably portrayed as female, Silat embody fears about feminine wiles and the dangers of uncontrolled desire, though this gendering likely says more about the societies that created these stories than about any intrinsic nature of the jinn themselves. The transformation of jinn from pagan spirits to Islamic beings represents one of the most fascinating examples of religious syncretism. When Islam emerged in 7th century Arabia, it did not entirely reject the supernatural beliefs of the existing culture. Instead, it reframed them within a monotheistic context, acknowledging the existence of jinn while radically altering their religious significance. The Quran mentions jinn in numerous passages, confirming their reality and describing their nature with clarity. One entire chapter of Islam's holy book bears the name Surah al-Jinn, the chapter of the jinn, which recounts how a group of jinn heard the Prophet Muhammad reciting Quran and were so moved by its beauty and truth that they immediately accepted Islam. This narrative establishes several crucial points. First, jinn can hear and understand human language and religious teaching. Second, they are capable of recognizing truth and responding to divine guidance. Third, their conversion to Islam demonstrates that they, like humans, will face judgment and afterlife based on their choices and actions. This theological position places jinn in a unique space within Islamic cosmology. Angels exist as beings of pure light, created to serve Allah without question or doubt. They possess no free will and cannot disobey. Humans occupy the middle ground, fashioned from earth, granted free will, capable of both belief and disbelief. Jinn mirror humans in this crucial respect. Made from fire rather than clay, invisible rather than visible, possessing powers humans lack, they nonetheless share with humanity the burden and blessing of choice. This parallel existence means jinn have their own prophets, their own holy books, their own path to salvation or damnation. Islamic tradition speaks of jinn who fast during Ramadan, perform the pilgrimage to Mecca, pray 5 times daily, give to charity, just as righteous humans do. Conversely, There exist Jinn who reject all divine guidance, who actively work against the cause of righteousness, who will face the same hellfire that awaits wicked humans. The Quran explicitly warns against seeking aid from Jinn or worshipping them, practices common in pre-Islamic Arabia. The scripture makes clear that Jinn, regardless of their power, are created beings subordinate to Allah. They deserve no worship, no veneration, no religious devotion. Turning to them for guidance or protection represents a form of shirk, the unforgivable sin of associating partners with Allah. This prohibition aimed to eliminate the practice of consulting Jinn-inspired soothsayers and the broader cultural habit of treating powerful Jinn as minor deities deserving of sacrifice and supplication. Yet while worship of Jinn is forbidden, acknowledging their existence and guarding against their harmful influence remains a legitimate concern within Islamic practice. The religion provides specific protections, particular verses and prayers meant to shield believers from Jinn interference. This apparent contradiction resolves when we understand that protecting oneself from a dangerous creature does not mean worshiping that creature. One might take precautions against a venomous snake without venerating serpents as divine. Islamic tradition describes various ways Jinn might interact with humans, not all of them negative. Some Jinn choose to live peacefully alongside humans, inhabiting spaces humans rarely enter, causing no trouble and asking for none in return. Others develop more active relationships, sometimes even romantic attachments, though such connections are strongly discouraged. Marriage between humans and Jinn is technically possible, but considered unwise, for the differences between the species create insurmountable difficulties. More concerning are cases of Jinn possession, where a malevolent spirit enters a human body and exerts control. Islamic literature describes such possessions in detail, noting how the possessed individual might display supernatural strength, speak in voices not their own, demonstrate knowledge they should not possess, or exhibit behaviors completely contrary to their normal character. Religious scholars and spiritual healers developed specific rituals, collectively called ruqya, to expel possessing Jinn and restore the afflicted person to their right mind. These exorcism practices rely primarily on Quranic recitation, particularly passages that emphasize Allah's absolute power and authority over all creation. The theory holds that Jinn, being created beings, cannot withstand direct confrontation with divine word. When sacred scripture is recited over a possessed person, the Jinn finds the experience unbearable and must flee. Some traditions claim that during exorcism, the Jinn might speak through the possessed person, negotiating, making promises, pleading, or threatening. Experienced practitioners know not to trust such communication, for Jinn are master deceivers who will say anything to escape the discomfort of holy recitation. The concept of the Quran adds another layer to Jinn-human interaction. According to widespread Islamic belief, every human has a personal Jinn assigned to them from birth, a companion spirit that accompanies them throughout life. This Quran exists to tempt, to whisper doubts, to encourage sin. It is not precisely the same as possession, for the Quran does not control the person but merely influences them. Resisting the Quran's influence represents a constant spiritual struggle, a battle every believer must fight daily. Among all humans who ever lived, only one allegedly possessed the power to command Jinn with absolute authority. King Solomon, known in Arabic as Suleiman, stands as a towering figure in Jinn mythology, the wise ruler who bent the fire spirits to his will and made them servants of divine purpose. The story of Solomon's power over Jinn begins with a gift from heaven itself. According to both Jewish and Islamic traditions, when Solomon became king and prayed for wisdom to rule justly, Allah granted him far more than he requested. The wisdom was given, certainly, but alongside it came extraordinary abilities, including the power to understand the language of animals, to command the winds, and most remarkably, to control all manner of supernatural beings, including jinn. The instrument of this control was a ring, variously called the Seal of Solomon, or the Ring of Solomon, one of the most legendary magical artifacts in all of human mythology. Descriptions of the ring vary across different traditions, but most accounts agree on its essential features. It was fashioned from brass and iron, the two metals representing Solomon's dual authority over good and evil spirits, respectively. Upon the ring's face was engraved a powerful symbol, either a pentagram or hexagram, depending on the source, and within this geometric form appeared the ineffable name of God, the divine appellation so sacred it could not be spoken aloud. With this ring on his finger, Solomon could point at any jinn or demon and compel it to appear before him. He could issue commands that could not be refused, binding spirits to specific tasks or imprisoning them if they proved rebellious. The power derived not from Solomon himself, but from the divine name engraved upon the ring. The jinn, recognizing the authority of Allah, even when they rejected his laws, had no choice but to obey. Solomon put this power to practical use, most famously in the construction of his great temple in Jerusalem. The task required moving enormous stones, performing feats of engineering that would challenge even modern technology. Rather than condemning thousands of human workers to backbreaking and dangerous labor, Solomon commanded jinn to do the heavy work. Powerful Ifrit moved massive blocks of stone as easily as humans might move pebbles. Other jinn shaped metals, carved decorations, performed tasks requiring supernatural strength or precision. One famous account tells of the Queen of Sheba's visit to Solomon's court. When she prepared to travel to Jerusalem, Solomon decided to impress her by relocating her throne from her distant kingdom to his palace before she arrived. An Ifrit offered to perform this task, boasting he could retrieve the throne before Solomon rose from his seat. But Solomon declined the offer, choosing instead to rely on a pious human servant whose prayer to Allah accomplished the miracle even faster. This story illustrates an important principle in Solomon's use of jinn. He commanded them, yes, but he did not depend on them. His true power came from his relationship with the divine, not from the spirits he controlled. Not all jinn submitted willingly to Solomon's authority. Some tested him, attempting to find loopholes in his commands or ways to subvert his will. The ring made outright disobedience impossible, but clever jinn could sometimes twist the spirit of an order while technically fulfilling its letter. Solomon's wisdom proved equal to their cunning, however, and the few who persisted in resistance found themselves imprisoned in vessels of brass or stone, sealed with Solomon's mark and cast into the sea, where they would remain trapped for centuries or millennia. One particularly dramatic story tells of how Solomon temporarily lost his ring, and with it, his power over the jinn. The accounts vary in details, but most versions involve deception by a rebellious spirit, often identified as either Asmodeus or Saker. This jinn somehow obtained the ring, perhaps by tricking one of Solomon's wives into giving it to him, and cast Solomon out, assuming his form and ruling in his place for 40 days. During this time, the true Solomon wandered his kingdom as a pauper, unrecognized and unbelieved when he claimed to be the king. The reversal of fortune finally came when the jinn, growing overconfident, threw the ring into the sea, perhaps believing this would make recovery impossible. But divine providence intervened. A fish swallowed the ring. That same fish was caught by a poor fisherman, and through circumstances too coincidental to be anything but ordained, that fish ended up served to the displaced Solomon. When he cut it open and found his ring, power instantly returned to him. He reclaimed his throne, punished the impostor, and thereafter guarded the ring more carefully. This tale serves multiple purposes in the broader mythology. It demonstrates that even the greatest power ultimately depends on divine will and can be lost through complacency. It shows that Jinn, for all their supernatural abilities, cannot ultimately triumph over humans chosen by God. And it warns that relying too heavily on power over spirits, rather than on righteousness and divine favor, makes one vulnerable to the very forces one supposedly controls. After Solomon's death, according to legend, the ring was lost forever. Some stories claim it remained on his finger and was buried with him, its location unknown. Others suggest it was deliberately hidden or destroyed to prevent any other human from wielding such dangerous authority. A few romantic tales propose that it still exists somewhere, waiting for a worthy individual to discover it and restore Solomon's dominion over the spirit world. But most traditions agree that Solomon's power was unique, a specific gift that died with him, and that no human since has possessed comparable control over Jinn. The most famous Jinn stories in Western culture come from the collection known as 1001 Nights, or the Arabian Nights, that magnificent compilation of Middle Eastern folk tales that has enchanted readers for centuries. These stories introduce the world to a particular image of Jinn, one that would become iconic despite being somewhat distant from original Arabian beliefs. The tale of Aladdin exemplifies this popularized version of Jinn mythology. Most people know the story from Disney's animated adaptation, but the original narrative, while sharing some basic elements, presents a notably different picture. In the traditional version, Aladdin is not a diamond-in-the-rough street urchin with a heart of gold, but rather an idle, disobedient boy whose transformation into a hero comes as much from fortunate circumstances as from any innate virtue. The Jinn of the lamp, when Aladdin accidentally summons him, appears as an enormous, terrifying figure. Not the friendly blue comedian of modern retellings. This Jinn is bound to serve whoever possesses the lamp, yes, but he is not enthusiastic about this servitude. He performs his duties with mechanical precision, granting wishes but offering no guidance, no friendship, no cheerful banter. The relationship remains purely transactional, a powerful being forced into service, resenting every moment of his imprisonment. This darker undertone runs through many Jinn stories in the Arabian Nights. The Fisherman and the Jinn presents an even more explicit example. A poor fisherman casts his net and pulls up an ancient brass jar, sealed with lead bearing Solomon's mark. Curious, he opens the jar and out pours smoke that coalesces into a massive Jinn, who immediately declares his intention to kill the fisherman. Centuries of imprisonment have driven the Jinn mad with rage. Initially, he planned to reward whoever freed him with riches and power, but as decades became centuries, his gratitude curdled into homicidal fury. The fisherman, desperate to save his life, uses his wits rather than strength. He expresses doubt that such an enormous creature could possibly have fit inside such a small jar, implying the Jinn is lying about his origin. The Jinn, insulted, immediately transforms back into smoke and flows into the jar to prove his claim. The instant he does so, the fisherman slams the seal back in place, trapping him once more. With the Jinn now his prisoner, the fisherman can negotiate from a position of strength, eventually reaching an agreement that benefits both parties. This story teaches multiple lessons simultaneously. It warns against unleashing forces you cannot control, for the fisherman's curiosity nearly cost him his life. It demonstrates that physical power is not the only power, that intelligence and quick thinking can overcome superior strength. It shows that Jinn, despite their supernatural abilities, are not infallible and can be outwitted by clever humans. And perhaps most importantly, it reinforces the idea that Jinn are dangerous, that even when they grant wishes or provide aid, they do so reluctantly and will turn on humans given any opportunity. The wish-granting aspect of Jinn mythology deserves special examination, for it represents one of the most enduring elements in popular culture. The idea of 3 wishes has become so familiar, it appears almost universally across multiple cultures. But its origins lie specifically in stories about Jinn. The number 3 carries significance in Islamic tradition, appearing repeatedly in religious texts and practices, which partially explains its prominence in these tales. But why wishes at all? The logic becomes clearer when we understand that Jinn, in being bound to objects, or commanded through Solomon's authority, or trapped through magical means, are essentially enslaved. The wish represents the price of this enslavement, the compensation owed for forcing a powerful being into servitude. A Jinn might be compelled to serve, but it cannot be compelled to serve happily, which is why wishes so often backfire. The Jinn interprets requests with malicious literalism, finding ways to grant what was asked while denying what was meant. Traditional stories overflow with examples of wishes gone catastrophically wrong. A man wishes for wealth and receives it as blood money after his son dies in an accident. A woman wishes for her husband's rival to be eliminated and watches in horror as her husband himself disappears instead. A merchant wishes his goods would sell rapidly and then watches his shop burn down with everything inside, technically selling nothing because nothing remains to sell. The message is consistent. Be careful what you wish for, especially when dealing with beings who have every reason to resent you. These cautionary tales reflect deeper wisdom about desire and consequence, about the difference between what we think we want and what actually brings happiness, about the danger of taking shortcuts rather than earning rewards through honest effort. They suggest that true power comes not from commanding supernatural servants, but from developing virtue and wisdom. They remind us that there are no easy solutions, that every gain has a cost, that magical thinking leads to tragic results. Given the dangerous nature of many jinn, how do ordinary people protect themselves? Islamic tradition provides detailed guidance on guarding against malevolent spirits, a body of protective practices that remains actively used in many Muslim communities worldwide. The foundation of all protection lies in faith itself. Regular prayer, especially the 5 daily prayers prescribed in Islam, creates a spiritual fortress around the believer. The very act of worship, of consciously turning toward Allah and reaffirming submission to divine will, strengthens the soul against all forms of corruption, including jinn influence. But beyond general religious observance, specific verses and prayers offer particular protection. The most powerful protective verse is Ayat al-Kursi, the throne verse from Surah al-Baqarah. This passage describes Allah's absolute sovereignty and eternal watchfulness, proclaiming that His knowledge encompasses all things and His power sustains all creation. Tradition holds that anyone who recites this verse before sleeping will remain under divine protection throughout the night, shielded from all jinn interference until morning. The verse is so revered that many Muslims memorize it in childhood and recite it daily throughout their lives. 2 other chapters, Surah al-Falaq and Surah an-Nas, collectively known as the Muawwidhatayn or the 2 refuges, provide similar protection. Both are short prayers seeking Allah's shelter from various forms of evil, including explicitly from the mischief of Jinn. The Prophet Muhammad reportedly recited these verses regularly and recommended them to his followers as powerful shields against supernatural harm. Many Muslims recite them 3 times each morning and evening, creating a continuous cycle of protection. Beyond Quranic verses, various traditional practices aim to repel Jinn. Burning specific incenses like agarwood or black seed is believed to create an environment Jinn find unbearable, driving them from homes and spaces. Iron holds special significance, as Jinn supposedly fear this metal, perhaps because their nature as fire beings makes them vulnerable to its grounding properties. Some people wear iron amulets or place iron objects at thresholds to prevent Jinn entry. Water that has been prayed over, particularly water into which Quranic verses have been recited, can be used for spiritual cleansing. This practice, while not explicitly mentioned in the Quran, has ancient roots and remains common in many Muslim cultures. The theory holds that water absorbs and transmits the blessing of divine word, making it effective in washing away negative spiritual influences. Cleanliness plays a crucial role in protection. Islamic law prescribes meticulous attention to personal hygiene, and this principle extends to spiritual cleanliness as well. Jinn are said to be attracted to unclean places, to bathrooms, garbage dumps, abandoned buildings where filth accumulates. Maintaining physical cleanliness in one's environment therefore helps prevent Jinn from taking up residence. Some traditions specifically warn against certain behaviors in bathrooms, like speaking too long or unnecessarily, as these spaces are considered particularly vulnerable to Jinn presence. The concept of the evil eye connects closely to Jinn beliefs. Envy and malicious gazing are believed to cause actual harm, and Jinn can serve as vehicles for this negative energy. Protection against the evil eye, therefore, also provides protection against Jinn. Common talismans include blue glass beads featuring eye patterns, called nazar, which reflect back harmful gazes. The Hand of Fatima, another popular protective symbol, similarly wards against evil influences. When protection fails and a Jinn manages to possess someone, ruqya becomes necessary. This Islamic exorcism practice follows specific protocols. A qualified practitioner, usually someone known for piety and Quranic knowledge, recites verses over the afflicted person. The recitation focuses on passages emphasizing Allah's absolute power and the obligation of all created beings to submit to His will. As the verses are recited, the possessing Jinn supposedly experiences increasing discomfort, finding the divine words painful or unbearable. During ruqya, the Jinn might speak through the possessed person, revealing its identity, explaining why it attached itself to this particular individual, perhaps pleading to be left alone or threatening the exorcist. Experienced practitioners know to treat such communication with extreme caution. Jinn are notorious liars who will say anything to escape the situation. They might claim to be Muslim Jinn who meant no harm, or insist they were invited by the possessed person, or promise to leave if the recitation stops. The exorcist continues regardless, driving the spirit out through persistent application of Quranic verses until the possessed person shows signs of release, typically including physical exhaustion but mental clarity. These practices coexist with modern medical understanding in complex ways. Many Muslims acknowledge that psychological conditions exist and can be treated with conventional medicine and therapy, while simultaneously maintaining that genuine possession can also occur. The two explanations are not necessarily seen as contradictory. Some cases might be entirely psychological. Others might represent genuine spiritual affliction, and still others might combine elements of both. From the ancient deserts of Arabia to the modern world's cities and screens, the Jinn have maintained their presence in human consciousness. They appear in contemporary novels, films, television series, video games. Sometimes they are portrayed with reasonable accuracy to traditional beliefs. More often, they are filtered through Western interpretations, transformed into wish-granting genies who emerge from lamps with a puff of smoke and a cheerful greeting. Yet even in these simplified modern versions, something of the original mystery persists. The Jinn represent forces beyond human control, powers that exist outside normal physical laws. They embody our fascination with the supernatural, our desire to believe that invisible worlds exist parallel to our own, that reality contains more than what our limited senses perceive. In an age increasingly dominated by scientific materialism, where every phenomenon must be explained through measurable causes, the Jinn remind us of older worldviews where mystery was not something to be eliminated, but something to be respected. In Muslim-majority countries, belief in Jinn remains robust and active. People still take precautions against them, still recite protective verses, still seek help from religious scholars when they suspect Jinn interference. This is not considered superstition, but rather acceptance of reality as described in Scripture. The Quran explicitly confirms Jinn existence, and for believers, that settles the matter. To deny Jinn would mean denying Quranic truth, which is impossible for the faithful. Anthropologists and religious scholars study Jinn beliefs as windows into cultural values and fears. The stories we tell about supernatural beings reveal what we value and what we dread. Jinn tales emphasize several recurring themes: the danger of pride, the importance of cleverness over strength, the unreliability of shortcuts to success, the need for proper respect toward powers greater than ourselves. These lessons transcend any particular culture or era, speaking to universal human concerns. The Jinn also embody ambiguity in ways that purely good angels or purely evil demons cannot. They are capable of both virtue and vice, wisdom and foolishness, generosity and cruelty. In this sense, they mirror humanity more closely than any other supernatural beings. Looking at Jinn mythology, we see reflected our own moral complexity, our capacity to choose between right and wrong, our struggles with temptation and doubt. The Jinn are not simply monsters to be feared or allies to be sought. They are beings as morally ambiguous as we are, pursuing their own interests in a complicated world. This complexity makes them endlessly fascinating. Simple monsters become predictable after a while. We know how vampire stories end, how zombie narratives resolve, what to expect from werewolf tales. But Jinn stories resist such easy categorization. A Jinn might be helpful or harmful, honest or deceptive, bound by ancient oaths or completely free. Approaching a Jinn means entering genuine uncertainty, and uncertainty generates the kind of tension that makes for compelling storytelling. The physical descriptions of Jinn, when they choose to manifest in forms humans can perceive, range from the beautiful to the terrifying. Some appear as humans of extraordinary attractiveness, their beauty serving as a lure to trap the unwary. Others manifest as monstrous beings, towering giants wreathed in flame, with eyes like burning coals. Still others take animal forms, becoming serpents, dogs, cats, or most commonly, desert creatures like camels and scorpions. This shape-shifting ability means one can never be entirely certain whether the stranger on the road or the animal in the shadows might be something other than it appears. Traditional wisdom provides guidance for those who encounter Jinn unexpectedly. Never accept food or drink from strangers in isolated places. Never follow mysterious lights in the desert at night. Never answer if someone calls your name but you cannot see who is calling. Never enter abandoned buildings without invoking divine protection. These rules might seem like simple common sense, practical advice for surviving in harsh environments. But they carry deeper meaning when we understand that every rule addresses a specific Jinn tactic, a known method these beings use to gain power over humans. The relationship between humans and Jinn, as described across centuries of tradition, is fundamentally one of caution mixed with respect. We do not seek them out, for that way lies danger, but we acknowledge their reality and maintain appropriate spiritual defenses. We do not worship them or treat them as divine, but neither do we dismiss them as mere superstition. They are part of creation, fellow inhabitants of a complex cosmos, beings with whom we share this world, even if we rarely directly interact. Some mystical traditions within Islam speak of more positive relationships with Jinn. Certain Sufi orders tell of righteous Jinn who attended the gatherings of holy men, drawn by the spiritual power of these advanced practitioners. Stories circulate of Muslim Jinn who help believers in times of need, who warn of approaching danger, who even fight alongside humans against evil forces, both physical and spiritual. These accounts present a more optimistic vision, suggesting that cooperation between the two species is possible when both sides embrace righteousness and reject corruption. As we reach the end of our exploration into Jinn mythology, we find ourselves facing beings as complex and multifaceted as the cultures that created their stories. The Jinn are not simply monsters or magical servants. They are a lens through which generations of people have examined questions of power and responsibility, freedom and fate, the seen and unseen dimensions of existence. They challenge our assumptions about reality, reminding us that our sense in the swirling sands where we began this journey, the Jinn continue their parallel existence, invisible but present, pursuing their own purposes in their hidden realm. Whether we believe in their literal existence or view them as powerful metaphors, the stories endure. They speak to something deep in human consciousness, that instinct that tells us the world contains more mystery than materialist explanations allow, that forces operate beyond our comprehension, that we share creation with beings whose nature we can barely imagine. The next time you find yourself in an isolated place as darkness falls, when the wind whispers across empty spaces, and you feel that peculiar sensation of being watched by eyes you cannot see, perhaps you will remember these tales. Perhaps you will recite a protective verse, or simply proceed with appropriate caution. The Jinn, after all, have been here far longer than humanity. Born from smokeless fire at the dawn of creation, they will remain long after we are gone, eternal witnesses to the rise and fall of mortal civilizations, forever walking the boundary between the visible and invisible worlds. If you enjoyed this deep exploration into the mythology of the Jinn, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more journeys into the ancient stories that continue to shape our understanding of the supernatural. Until next time, stay curious about the mysteries that surround us, and remember that some questions have no easy answers, only stories that bring us closer to truth.